believe you are free. You believe you choose. You believe you act because you want to. But what if that belief itself is the greatest illusion of all? From the moment you wake up, it feels like you're making choices. What to wear, what to eat, what to say. But look closer. Each action feels less like a decision and more like a reflex, a loop, a script, a pattern inherited from somewhere deep within. Habits, conditioning, echoes of fear and memory. Modern neuroscience has offered something deeply unsettling: that your brain initiates actions milliseconds before you're even conscious of choosing them. You think you decide, but by the time you become aware of your choice, the decision has already been made. And Nietzsche knew this long before fMRI scans did. He warned us that the concept of free will wasn't a revelation, it was a trap, a construct designed to place blame, justify punishment, maintain order. Society loves free will because free will implies blame, and blame means control. If you are free to choose, then every failure is your fault. Every struggle, your weakness. Every pain, your punishment. It makes you judgeable, condemnable, correctable. But what if freedom isn't what you think? What if your choices are shaped less by desire and more by biology, trauma, culture, environment? What if you are not the author, but the product of a story written by forces you cannot see? The illusion of free will comforts us. It lets us believe we are in control, that we are the architects of our destiny, that meaning is ours to make. But sometimes, the things that comfort us most are the very things that keep us blind. Nietzsche once said, "Freedom of will." That is the expression for the multifaceted state of delight of the person who commands, and who is conscious of the fact that the execution of the command will be carried out without resistance. Real freedom, he believed, doesn't come from pretending you are autonomous. It comes from confronting what shapes you. The instincts, the drives, the compulsions, the hidden programming. Not to escape them, but to learn to dance with them, to move consciously within your constraints. You are not a blank slate. You are a battlefield. A convergence of impulses, patterns, fears, dreams, inherited wounds. To understand your choices, you must go deeper than intention. You must descend into the roots of desire, not just what you chose, but why you felt compelled to choose it. And maybe, just maybe, true freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's finally understanding why you wanted it in the first place. Your brain moves first. Then, you notice. This isn't poetry. It's not just a philosophical idea. It's science. Measurable, observable, repeatable. In a series of experiments, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet asked people to do something simple. Move a finger whenever they felt the urge. Electrodes recorded their brain activity, and what they found was unsettling. The brain had already started the action, milliseconds before the person became aware of choosing it. Let that sink in. Your conscious mind didn't decide. It reported a decision that had already begun. You're not the captain steering the ship. You're the narrator, describing the voyage after the ship has turned. You think you're choosing, but many times, you're just witnessing. Witnessing choices born from places far beneath awareness. Old instincts, buried emotions, deep patterns. And it doesn't end there. The processes that guide your life aren't random. They're shaped by thousands of silent forces. Your genes, your memories, your traumas, your family, your culture, your hormones, even what you had for breakfast. You think you chose your job, your partner, your dreams. But behind the curtain, your biology whispers. Your past whispers. Nietzsche saw this long before brain scans did. To him, the self was never a single sovereign thing. It was a battlefield where instincts clashed, where unconscious drives pulled in opposite directions. The idea of a unified me was a myth, comforting, but false. So when you say, "I decided," what you're really doing is explaining a choice that was already made. An impulse wrapped in a story. And in that light, freedom changes. It's no longer about being untouched by influence. It's about becoming aware of it. Because the less you see what moves you, the more it controls you. But when you see clearly, you can shape the current, not fight it, not escape it, just move with it. That's why people who believe in perfect control often suffer most. They blame themselves. They fight battles inside they don't even understand. They whisper, "Why am I so lost?" without ever looking beneath the surface. But when you stop pretending to be a god and start seeing yourself as a pattern, something strange happens. You don't fall into despair. You rise into humility. And inside that humility, you find power. Not the power to conquer life, but to dance with it. You're not the only author of your story, but you are still one of them. And that's not surrender, that's freedom. Because only when you see the river clearly can you learn how to steer. The deeper we go, the more disturbing the truth becomes. If free will is a myth, then what are we left with? Perhaps nothing more than a beautifully convincing illusion. A sense of control pasted carefully over instincts, biases, traumas, and inherited scripts we never consciously chose. Modern neuroscience gives us a window into this unsettling reality. Studies show decisions forming in the brain before we are even aware of them. Electrical signals, so-called readiness potentials, begin firing milliseconds before your conscious mind decides. You think you are choosing, but your body has already moved. Your neurons have already fired. Your subconscious has already decided. The conscious mind is not a commander. It's a storyteller, a narrator crafting a coherent narrative after the ship has already changed direction. You are not steering the ship. You are reading the ship's log, convincing yourself you're the captain. Nietzsche understood this long before fMRI machines could prove it. He warned us that free will was not a spiritual truth, but a cultural invention, a clever mechanism to assign blame and justify punishment. If we had no free will, he wrote, the strong sense of guilt and sin would collapse. In other words, society depends on the illusion. Because if we're not truly free, then the moral architecture crumbles. Guilt no longer holds. Punishment loses justification. And so we are taught from childhood. You could have chosen differently. You should have known better. You are responsible. It's a genius design for control. Convince people they are free, then punish them for failing to meet standards they never truly chose. But what happens when the illusion cracks? First comes fear. If I'm not truly free, then who or what am I? A puppet? A machine? A pattern? Then comes anger. Rage at a system that blames without understanding, that shames without compassion, that celebrates the privileged and condemns the wounded, as if both started from the same place. But beyond fear, and anger comes clarity. If you are never fully the author of your flaws, then maybe you don't need to drown in shame. And if others weren't the authors of theirs, then maybe they don't need your judgment. They need your understanding. When you begin to see the machine, you stop hating the cogs. You stop punishing yourself for being imperfect. You stop idolizing those who seem perfect. Because now you see, they're not gods. They're just conditioned differently. You begin to understand. Judgment loses its teeth when freedom is exposed as illusion. Once you accept that free will might be an illusion, a new kind of responsibility emerges. Not the shallow kind, rooted in guilt and blame, but a deeper responsibility, anchored in awareness, in presence, in choice. Instead of saying, "It's all my fault," you begin asking, "Where did this pattern come from? What unseen forces shaped it? And more importantly, what can I consciously choose to do now, in this moment?" Responsibility, under this new lens, is not about punishment. It's not about self-loathing. It's about conscious engagement with your own complexity. It's about seeing the layers, recognizing the invisible hands that move your thoughts, your reactions, your urges, and then carving out a sliver of clarity inside the machine. You may not have chosen your instincts. You may not have chosen your fears. You may not have chosen your pain, but you can choose your relationship to them. You can choose how you dance with them. You can choose whether you react blindly or respond consciously. This isn't the kind of freedom you were raised to believe in. It's not grand, not cinematic. It won't sell books or build empires. It's small, subtle, internal, but it's real. And here's the paradox. The more you accept the limitations of your freedom, the freer you actually become. When you stop pretending to be the sovereign author of every chapter of your life, you let go of false narratives. You begin to notice, really notice, how a certain voice tone triggers you, how a childhood wound still whispers, how your body remembers pain long after your mind forgets, and in seeing clearly, you gain space. A tiny pause, a breath, a sacred second between stimulus and response. And in that pause, you can ask, is this really me? Is this how I want to show up in the world? In that moment, however brief, you are freer than you've ever been. Nietzsche understood this. He didn't believe in traditional free will, but he believed in the will to power, the inner force to shape yourself within the walls of your own nature. You're not free to erase your wiring, but you are free to work with it, to refine it, to shape it, to become its craftsman. This kind of freedom requires brutal honesty. It demands that you stop seeing yourself as a flawless hero or a helpless victim, and start seeing yourself as a being in motion, shaped, scarred, still capable. It's not the freedom of gods. It's the freedom of the awake. And awakening, painful as it is the first act of reclaiming your life. If freedom is not absolute, if much of what we do is orchestrated by biology, by history, by environment, then what happens to our dreams, to our ambitions, to the delicate sense of individuality we cling to? It leaves them trembling on a tightrope, precarious, exposed, but not meaningless. Because even if you don't have full control over your impulses, you still have influence over what you choose to nurture. You can't change where the river begins, but you can decide where to build your bridges. This is where Nietzsche's idea of the will to power becomes not just abstract philosophy, but a lived, embodied truth. The will to power is not about domination over others. It's about wrestling with your own internal chaos. It's about gathering the fragmented drives inside you: fear, rage, longing, tenderness, and forging them into a direction. The unaware person is a puppet, moved by strings they cannot see. The aware person becomes a sculptor, shaping their instincts into meaning. Nietzsche never promised liberation from pain. He wasn't a peddler of cheap positivity. He offered something harder and more honest: endurance. The courage to carry your burdens not with resentment, but with creative defiance. Because your desires will never be entirely yours. Your thoughts will always echo with voices you didn't invite. But awareness grants you a different kind of power. The power to move forward with your eyes open. You are not the master of the winds, but you can learn to sail. This, perhaps, is the dignity of the human condition. Not a becoming gods, not an escaping nature, but in consciously navigating its wild currents. And this is why surrendering the fantasy of absolute free will is not defeat. It's an invitation. An invitation to stop lying to yourself, to stop pretending you were handed a blank canvas. Because life is not blank. It's a block of rough stone, cracked, uneven, and full of inherited scars. You don't choose the stone, but you choose what to carve from it. Every time you pause before reacting, every time you reflect before speaking, every time you tend to a wound instead of hiding it, that is you, chiseling the stone, becoming an artist of your own existence. The tragedy isn't that we're limited. The tragedy is that most people never realize how much creation is still possible within those limits. You can't erase your past. You can't rewrite your DNA. But you can refuse to be ruled by them. And that, flawed, messy, and human, is the only freedom that was ever real. The true battle was never about controlling the outside world. It was never about bending life perfectly to your will. It was never about engineering flawless outcomes. The real struggle has always been internal, between awareness and unconsciousness, between creation and compulsion, between the part of you that sees and the part that reacts. Nietzsche knew this. He knew that life wasn't about eradicating struggle. It was about rising to meet it, again and again, consciously. When you stop clinging to the illusion of total control, you gain something far more durable: resilience. Not the kind that shatters when life breaks your plans, but the kind that stands, even inside chaos, even in the dark, even in doubt. Instead of demanding the world conform to your expectations, you adapt. You evolve. Not because you are weak, but because you are awake. And being awake means knowing. Your real power isn't in controlling every external circumstance. It's in mastering your response to them, moment by moment, thought by thought, breath by breath. You are not here to live a sanitized, optimized, curated life. You're here to struggle well, to fall and rise, consciously, to participate in the tragedy and beauty of existence, not to become a prisoner of illusion. That's why Nietzsche didn't preach despair, even while rejecting free will. He offered a tougher kind of hope, the hope that within limitations, even when freedom is flawed, there's still something sacred in the act of choosing your response. You may not control the winds. You may not rewrite your past. You may not silence your biology. But you can choose, again and again, not to become their slave. You can sculpt your instincts into virtues. Transform your wounds into wisdom. Walk through fire with your eyes open. And in that quiet rebellion lies something precious. Real freedom. Not the loud kind, not the glamorous kind, but the kind that shows up in silence, in stillness, in choosing awareness over numbness, meaning over chaos, truth over illusion. It's the freedom of the craftsman, who shapes a life they didn't fully choose, but choose to shape anyway. But before you rush to celebrate this inner strength, stop. Ask yourself, where's your ambition coming from? Is it the voice of your soul, or the whisper of a fear you haven't faced yet? Because sometimes, what we chase, what we glorify, what we sacrifice ourselves for, isn't freedom at all. It's just another prison